Learning style is an individual, natural, and habitual pattern of acquiring and processing information in learning situations. Um, so one of the most and widely used categorizations of this learning style is by Neil Fleming. It's also called the VARK model. And VARK stands for V, visual learner, A for auditory learners, and reading, writing is the R, and kinesthetic is for the K.
So at some point here, you're definitely going to ask yourself, why should learning styles matter to me? How does this connect to my religion, my faith? I just don't get how this all ties together. I totally understand that thought, but I'd like to challenge you and say I think that an understanding of learning styles can be a powerful benefit to each of us in our development in faith, in our interaction with other people of faith, in our experience within a religion. Um, Understanding that every different person learns in their own way makes such a big difference when we look at the shared experiences we have. Starting with something like a worship service, knowing that different people are going to connect with different parts of the service in very different ways, it can have a couple of major impacts, a couple of major benefits. One, perhaps some of the parts of the service that don't really do anything for us, and we think, well, we can just get rid of that. Why bother include that moment? That could be the one piece that's powerful and meaningful and makes all the difference for somebody else. So knowing that different people learn and take in information in different ways can really help us to be more open-minded about how a service runs and how this information is shared. If we look at other times when we interact with people, whether it's at a church gathering like a supper or those fun silent auctions we do, or perhaps there's an evening of like a talent show evening or some sort of skits or play, every single one of those types of events are sharing information, are sharing experiences with people that everybody's going to react with in their own way. And I think what it does is it opens our minds and allows us to get into and appreciate the diversity of the people around us, of the other members of the congregation, of the members of the community who we are inviting into our different events. It really gives us an opportunity to take a look at them and wonder, well, I wonder if maybe you are enjoying this this music service more because that's how you connect, or perhaps when we have our multimedia events or some parts presented on a screen during a worship service, that's the thing that somebody really gets. Or we've invited somebody to come do liturgical dance, which for some people just has no real connection whatsoever, but for somebody else, seeing the fluid motion and interacting and feeling the action can be such a major connection for them to the words, to the actions, to whatever it is that's going on. I think knowing ourselves also makes a big difference. I know, of course, every worship service or every event, there are times when you feel yourself shutting down, where it's like, well, I'm no longer engaged. This is no use to me. Whether it's boredom, or you start fidgeting, or you move on to something else mentally, or even physically get up and leave. Knowing yourself, being self-aware in which learning styles connect the strongest for you, it can really give you a better understanding and a better opportunity to deal with those times when you feel yourself just tuning out. Knowing that, say, you're not a kinesthetic learner, and so if somebody is inviting you to walk a labyrinth or to color a mandala or those sorts of things, you can go into it and maybe intentionally holding an open mind, saying, this is not typically my style of learning, but I wonder how it might affect me. Being self-aware of the ways that you take in information very easily and very strongly, as well as the places where that you don't really connect with. It can really lead you into a better experience. It can help you to come into different experiences with a more open mind. So I hope that you enjoy the discussion today, that you do some of the extra reading and really get your head around how different people learn in different ways. Now, this is the goal here is not to pigeonhole people. It's not so that you can walk around saying, "Oh, well, you're just a visual learner, or you're kinesthetic, so you have to go over here and do this thing." It's not that at all, because each person is going to show traits from different types. We all have different connections. It's just that some are stronger than others, some are weaker than others. So I hope you use this to open your mind, to be more ready to take on new situations, and to be more understanding of the people around you, that they might just not be understanding things the way you do. They might not be connecting in the same learning styles as you do.
So the first styles we have is the visual learners. Visual learners attend to information most effectively when they see something. And for example, they like pictures, diagram, films, and videos, or even demonstrations. Visual learners remember what they see rather than what they heard. They remember diagrams and pictures much easily than they would when they see something. They have trouble remembering verbal information, and they like the art more than music, visual art more than music. So visual learners will enjoy pictures, maps, PowerPoints, watching some skits, drawing, coloring, reading, or even mind maps. Visual learners rather want to write their prayers or draw their prayers, and they will enjoy more that than for listening, for example. They will even enjoy writing graffiti prayers on a wall at church for church activities, for example. Visual learners love vivid colors and pictures. So when they have Bibles in there where there's maps and there's diagrams, that's really where they enjoy reading the Bible. There's also a lot of colorful Bible out there with maps in there and pictures and archaeological findings. So these are Bibles that the visual learners really enjoy. The oral learner attend classes, attend discussions and tutorials. They discuss topics with others. They like to record their classes. They remember interesting examples, stories, and jokes. That's how they learn, because they have something to remember because they heard it. In a church setting, for example, what an oral learner will love is when you tell a story, but you had some sounds to it. For example, when we are telling the story of the Tower of Babel, and the auditory learners love to hear bricks, the sound of bricks being put one on top of the other. So that is a good example for auditory or oral learners. When they hear a story, they like to have the sound that comes with it. Another style is the reading writing, the R in bark. And the reading writing people like lists, headings, dictionaries, definitions, handouts, textbooks, reading at the library. They will write their note exactly how they heard it. So that's how the reading writing people kind of learn, is when they have lists and manuals and things like that, some texts even. In church setting, the reading writing will like to have their bulletin so they can read it. They will also have a tendency to take notes in their Bibles or write in the margin of their Bibles when they learn something or when they want to remember something. That's how they will take their notes and learn from what is being presented at the front of the church. And finally, in the bark, we have the K, which stands for kinesthetic learners. Kinesthetic learners love movement and touch. They're hands-on learners. In teaching the Tower of Babel, the same example I used before, they like to do a hands-on type of thing. So they will probably use some Play-Doh and do an actual Babel tower. And I remember one time that I heard a sermon, and the preacher was using literally Legos and to build the wall of Jericho, for example. So that was really interesting for me to see. But for kinesthetic, they really enjoyed doing the actual wall. So that's how kinesthetic learners like to learn.
Hey, Marco, now that you've spent some time and have an understanding of learning styles and how those things relate to the way people learn, can you come up with an example from your past of a worship experience, either one you were involved with or one you've heard of, that really stood out for you as being something that would connect with some of the other learning styles? Just piece it together for us so we've got a better understanding of how worship and learning styles can fit together.
Well, I remember one time, instead of we had a regular worship. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a regular worship in the sense that it was all the prayers and all that. But instead of having a regular sermon, what we had was, and that was really interesting, it was someone that painted 4 paintings, something like you could see over here behind me. And what she did is like she cut it like in such a way that it was to make it like a puzzle, and it was like 4 puzzles. And the entire worship area was separated in 4 teams, if you will, of worshipers, and like all of us were in team and trying to put the puzzle back together. Not only that, putting the puzzle back together, but every puzzle and every final picture had a scripture theme. And the question it was, where do you see God? Not only in the picture, but also into the scripture. And that made it very interesting, especially for the kinesthetic style, where they need to touch with their hands and see, and like people were on all fours trying to figure out the puzzle, and some pictures were more abstract than others, so it made it a little more difficult and challenging. And I could really tell the people that were kinesthetic, they were really hands-on, having the piece in their hands and all that. Me, personally, I'm more of a visual or auditory. So having the the to solve the puzzle was making me more uncomfortable than it was helping me out. But it was a great example of a worship where you would try different things, and it's a good way also to it helps us, if you will, to see God. I would think, because God doesn't only we of course we do hear and see things about God, but like when we do touch, just like communion is really for the kinesthetic learning style, in the sense that they have to touch and see and they taste, and that is really a great way for kinesthetic people to feel the moment and be in the moment. So maybe these 2 examples would be kinesthetic styles of learning, but in the worship, that makes it even more interesting. So that would be my answer to you. I hope that helps.
Now, this one's a little bit personal, but I wonder if you would share with us the learning styles you connect closest with, whether that's from the VARC or any of those other learning styles, and let us know how that relates to you in worship. How do you connect?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and not too personal, but I have two examples to show you right now. I would say I'm very much of a visual person, visual and auditory, but especially visual. When you explain something, I like to have either an image or a graphic or something like that. So this is really how I learn, but also a great way for me to worship. And I'll give you two examples. The first example is I people don't know that about me, but I love study Bibles. I have tons of them, and one of them I really enjoy is I'll show you. I don't know if you can see, but I need graphics. I need in my study Bible. I need images. I don't know if I can find. Um, I don't know if I can find any. Yeah, over here. I need pictures. So this study Bible has tons of picture in them. So when you're talking about a place, I don't imagine it. I need to see it. So this is really interesting. And in that particular example, they're showing a tree, a sycamore tree. And so this study Bible is full of graphic examples, and that is just great for me because this is really how I learn. And the other way I learn is also reading and writing. I read a lot. I love to read. This is how I understand. This is how I learn. But I also like to write. And I'll give you another example. And this is my personal Bible. The other one I showed you is really the one I use when I prepare worship and sermons. And this one is, I'll show you. I don't know if you can tell, but in the margins, I write. And it's written all over the place. Oftentimes, it's after when I hear a sermon on a certain subject or certain verses. What I like to do is I always have a pen with me with my Bible, and I write down my thoughts and what I've learned. So here's another example that I write in the margins. So really, this Bible is written all over the place, and to the point where now I've started to write in another Bible because there's no more places. So these are two examples. I need something visual, either graphics or pictures and so on, to learn and to retain the information. So the first Bible I showed you is full of that. And the second one is really like my personal Bible, where I not only when I hear and see what's going on in the worship um, at worship time, but also what I like to do is write into my Bible. So here's our two personal example of how I I study and how I learn and all that. So I hope that answered your question, Greg.
Now, knowing the way that most traditional church services run, it's not always possible to engage all people of all learning styles every time. So I wonder if maybe you could make some suggestions for how people who have self-identified specific learning styles, what can they do to make sure that their needs are being met? Are there things that they can do personally to be aware of how their learning styles need to be fostered, or are there people they can get engaged with in their faith community to hopefully find better ways of learning, better ways of engaging their personal learning styles? Do you have any suggestions for us?
Yes, you're right. The worship does not always satisfy all four learning styles. Most of the time, it's really the auditory and visual. But when it comes to writing or even the kinesthetic, where they need to touch and they need to experience things either with their bodies or with their hands, it doesn't work so well. And we need, as church leaders, to find ways to reach to their learning styles and how they process information. Um, Something I found very interesting and very good as a community to do is I don't know if you've ever heard about the prayer shawls. Sometimes people from the UCW will knit some shawls, and these shawls will be given to people that are in hospital or at home being sick as a comforting um, um, like a comforting shawl, knowing that the community is there. What we do at our church, and I find that very interesting, is that these shawls at worship time are handed to the first person in the first row. And the first person in the first row will take the shawl, pray for it, and imagine healing for that person. And then it will hand the shawl to the next person, and the same thing will go on. So for about an hour, that shawl is being prayed by everyone in the the, the church. But for the kinesthetic, the people that need to touch, it's a really great way for them to experience worship in this way, where they can touch and experience physically what that means. Also, I remember one time a parishioner said, "When she basically said, I'm kinesthetic." And what's interesting is that she said, when I come, I knit. And when my hands are busy, when my hands are doing something, it's a way for me to learn and to be aware of my environment. I focus by doing something with my hands. So I find that a very interesting way of experiencing worship. I would think that worship could also be a little more physical. When we do a prayer, how about learning sign language about that prayer? I remember a few months ago, we did the prayer Our Father, and it was all in sign language, and it was really interesting because some people were really into it, and that's a way of engaging different learning styles. Also, um, I don't remember the title of the hymn, but it's "Peace Be With You," and it goes like this: "Peace, be with you," and this way it also engages all of our senses, and for the kinesthetic, it really answers them. Yeah, so these are little ideas, and I guess as we explore possibilities, we can come up as with much more ideas and ways of engaging all four learning styles in the worship. Greg, can you tell me what is your learning style, and what does it say about the way you understand your faith, or even um, express your faith?
So, what does a kinesthetic learner say about my faith? Well, the way that kinesthetic learning has really connected for me, definitely in any education institution that I've ever spent time with, it's really the practical side. I really connect strongly. I learn the best practically if I am shown things, if I get a chance to do things hands on. That is definitely the kinesthetic side for me. Um, how does that turn into faith, or how does that connect with my faith? That's a tough question. I guess I really see practical applications of my faith. I like to take theological discussions and turn them into something that has a practical understanding. I like to really see how um, the idea of loving your fellow man, for example, the Great Commission of love one another as you have been loved. For me, that has to turn into something practical, where you're acting practically, you're doing something to show your love. The idea of being known by our love, they'll know we are Christians by our love. That is the practical application for me. That's where my faith connects with my learning style. I've never really recognized that as being the thing for me. Definitely more along the audio or audible end of things. So I would certainly recommend for other people who have strong um, audible end of the VARC test, definitely definitely strong preaching, something really gets you fired up, something that with a lot of passion, as well as music. A great message in music. Everybody has their own music style that they like, but music can really get people like me going for sure.
Well, we've been talking a lot about learning styles, faith, church life. I was wondering if you think there's a downfall. Is there a pitfall when it comes to learning styles and church life? Is there a downside to that, and what can we do to prevent it, if anything?
I think the possibility of a downfall for really getting wrapped up in learning styles is you start to pigeonhole people. You start to assume that if this person has identified that they are a read-write style person, that that's the only way they learn. And that can happen both in educational institutions as well as within our church life. As soon as we think we know about somebody, as soon as we think we know everything there is to know about some person, I think there's a real danger there. I think that we can easily pigeonhole people, and there's a danger in that. I think we need to keep our eyes open and recognize the diversity in ourselves. Any of us who have taken any sort of test, whether it's a VARC or maybe a personality test like a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram, you see things about yourselves that you agree with, but then you also see parts that you disagree with. Well, we need to know that everybody else is that same way. Nobody exactly fits into any one of these pigeonholes. Everybody has real depth and real diversity, and every bit of who they are stems from a sum total of all their life experiences and everything they've learned and everything they've taken in. You can't write some pithy paragraph to describe them. So don't expect learning styles to tell you everything there is to know about people in your faith community. Instead, recognize that learning styles show the diversity of the people in your faith community. That concludes today's discussion on learning styles. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'd like to leave you with a few questions and activities of your own. We certainly hope you've taken the chance to do the VARC test and identify which learning styles are the strongest for you. And so with that knowledge, first off, I'd like you to think for a bit about what your learning styles say about your faith and your relationship with God. If you've been doing this as a group study, we'd like to invite each member of the group one at a time to stand up and mime out your learning style and see who can pick up on what you're trying to suggest. Thirdly, think for a minute about worship services that you have been at recently, and what parts of the worship service were most meaningful or connected with you the most. Now ask yourself if that has relevance now that you know what your learning style is and how you consume information. And last, take some time on your own to find a Bible verse or a Bible story that expresses best to you your ways of living your faith according to your learning style. We hope to see you again soon on another episode of The Loquacious Lay Ministers.